is a specific action that you think we should be looking at or that we should be recommending as a result of the discussions we've had during this whole conference. And I'll ask for a few suggestions at the end. We've had some technical difficulties and some biological difficulties, but we're ready to go. And I just want to set the stage a little bit by pointing out that there are two global phenomena that the experts have underestimated. One of them is climate change. Am I on? Yep. Okay. And the other one is the growth of tourism. That's changing the world in various ways. And in 2011, the UNWTO estimated 1.8 billion by 2030. They were wrong so far. They underestimated. It's already going faster than that. You heard Luigi on the first day of the conference mention we're approaching 1.4 for this year. And if this continues, we will be at 2 billion, not 1.8, in only 12 more years. This is phenomenal growth. And I want to show you a particular example that I hope will scare you a little bit. Let's go to the Philippines. Luigi also mentioned the island of Boracay, which was closed down for much of this year to get rehabilitated because it was still over-commercialized and overbuilt. And this is a Filipino ad campaign, which they call Privacy in Paradise. It's more fun in the Philippines. You're looking at one of the lagoons in the area called El Nido, at the end of Palawan. And if you've never been to El Nido, it's hard to get there. You fly into Puerto Princesa, and then you take a long, bumpy car ride for 4 or 5 hours in order to get to this place. It's really a kind of ecotourism destination, enhanced by these lovely lagoons and karst landscapes and whatnot. Nevertheless, look what has happened. I visited there in 2012, only 6 years ago, and already tourism was beginning to grow very fast. And they were worried about it then, and beginning to look at ways to maybe divert some of the tourism to another location nearby. But here's what happened to privacy. All these lagoons were now crammed with tourist boats, and it was no longer what it was supposed to be. It was no longer the kind of place that attracted people in the first place. And then, this has happened since then. Zowie. And it is no surprise then that at the beginning of this year, the Philippines announced, we've got to put a lid on this. It happened that fast. It was explosive, just like Iceland, only even faster. And in a place where there was no particular reason for this. The road didn't suddenly get better. It wasn't heavily promoted by Philippine tourism. It was just one of many places. But it took off kind of all under its own steam. And we're going to see more and more of that coming forward. I want to end with this last slide, which you've seen before, but I want to explain this in a little more detail than we had a chance to. This is kind of the recommended theoretical structure for what you would call a Destination Stewardship Council, or whatever other term you want. I want to give you the reasoning for this, and we learned this through painful experience doing some geotourism map guide projects with various destinations. The idea is that you've got these 3 sectors involved, but no one sector controls it. They have to agree, or at least 2/3 of them have to agree. We discovered that if the public sector owns the council, it is vulnerable to changes in government. It will not survive a change in government, because the next government wants to throw out whatever the previous one did. So it needs to be stabilized by the 2 other sectors, and each one brings something to the table. There are some countries where there isn't much of a civil society for this sector, and that's a problem, but there may be other possibilities to get a kind of balancing factor in there. Academia might be one, some outside media, even consultants. But it's good to have something to make sure there's this kind of buffer set of opinions in between public and private. And the last point is, and we found this from the ones that work pretty well, the way this really works in practice is, first of all, you need to have local champions, local leaders. If there is no local leader, it will fail because it becomes a top-down thing and it will not then the dark blue circle is really the people that make it work. You can think of that as a steering committee or brain trust, but it may be, 5, 6, 10, 12 people. Those are the ones that really keep it going. And then for any particular project, you bring in community members, outside experts, whatever it takes to do whatever project you're working on. That's the theory. It may be better ways than this, but this is the best we can think of so far. And we're looking for examples of where it's working, where it's not working, or where something else is working. So I'll end there, and we'll proceed to our next show, which is going to be, we've been through this so many times I'm forgetting our words, Georgie from the Azores.
So good afternoon to all. My name is Ronald. I came from the Azores Islands in Portugal. Okay, thank you. Azores is placed in the middle of the Atlantic between Europe and the United States. 2 hours from Lisbon and 4.5 hours from Boston. So I was invited to GSTC to be part of this plan. And we started, the tourism started in the Azores basically in the year 2000. Between 2000 and 2015, we identified some challenge. The accessibilities, because we are an island, you only go to the Azores by plane. Seasonality, it was a big challenge because we only have planes during the summer, and summer is July and August period. And of course, we are a nature destination, so one of the things we are exposed to is the vulnerability of the territory. That's what happened. Between the year 2000 and the year 2014, basically in the year 2000 we had construction of some hotels. That's why we pull out the guest nights from 600,000 to 1 billion, more or less, in the years before. And then we go flat until 2015. What happened in 2015, it was that we liberalized our space air. So we passed from 1 airline to 4, 5, 6, I don't know. That's why in 3 years we passed from 1.2 million to 2.3 million guest nights. So the challenge at the moment, it's the quality of the service that we provide in the islands. The balance between the 9 islands in the Azores, because 70% of the flux that we have in tourism goes only for 1 island. And of course, sustainability. Because we want to find, and that's why we are here, we want to try to find a balance between visitors and what we have to offer to the tourists, that is nature. And of course, we want also to use tourism for benefits of the population. So I have brought to you some examples of what we pretend to do. because once again, we are very new in the industry of tourism. We only have 20 years, 18 probably, and only in the last 3 years we could experience faster growth. Sorry. So how to respond to that? We make, of course, a strategic plan. We define a strategy based on potentialities of the destination, exploring the opportunities, and of course facing the current challenge. The strategy, it was made a vision, goals to achieve, of course, and structured the product and communicate this product. And of course, the implementation plan. One of the things that I want to bring here is we understood, because I didn't brought what we are doing about the environment or energy, because we like to think that we are advanced in this area. But engaging people, because the residents saw the double of visitors only in 3 years. So we start to focus on the contribute to the economic development of the region. We create, for instance, for local producers, we create a label. It's called a source label. It's in Portuguese because, but the translation is a source certified by nature. Every service that we have, every product, food or non-food, the handicraft or craft work, the service are being labeled, okay? Are being labeled. Just for you to know, at the moment, this program was created 3 years ago. At the moment, we have more than 100 enterprises involved, and we already given more than 1,800 seals or stamps to the project. So the local projects are being engaged into the tourist business by engaging by the relevance that we are giving to the local programs. So I don't have time for more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. I might add that the Azores have consistently been recognized as one of the best and most sustainable destinations anywhere. So it's a good place. And I recommend it. We're reorganizing things to deal with changes in our lineup. And Kim, if you're ready, would you be able to go ahead?
Sure.
Representing Vail, Colorado, which is something of an island itself, surrounded by protected forest area.
It's a different slide. So
Yeah.
you want to go to number 3?
That's the one that we're skipping.
Okay, thank you. My story is a little bit different. I come from Vail, Colorado, United States, in the Rocky Mountains. And our destination, like Jonathan said, is a small island surrounded by a vast sea of forests and trees and mountains. And we are about 8,100 feet in elevation and go up to 13,000 feet, so it's very alpine. Right now there's lots of snow there, so this is a very different place for me to be. So we started out with a call to action to become the first certified sustainable destination in the United States. It was quite a surprise, and we rallied to the occasion. Our community was preparing for a big alpine ski race, a ski championship, where countries from all over the world would be coming to compete, and we wanted to put our best foot forward. And so somebody from Sustainable Travel International said to us, hey, why don't you try to become the first certified sustainable destination in the United States? Jackson Hole's working on it, but maybe you can beat them. And being that I come from a very competitive alpine environment, and my community is that way as well, we said, sure, we want to take this on and see if we can do it. So we formed a Destination Stewardship Council, like Jonathan suggested. We're comprised of NGOs, local government, federal government, state government, and private sector. So the first thing we did, we had 2 years to prepare for the ski race. We decided that we really needed to start with the grassroots, so we developed an industry standard based on the GSTC criteria, which we call Actively Green. And to date, we've trained 220 businesses and certified just over 60 of them, and there's more in the pipeline. So that's been very successful, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But also through this process, as we were working on the destination certification, we had input from some of our private sector partners on the steering committee that they felt like the GSTC standard was a little bit too generic maybe for them, and they really wanted something that would speak to the challenges of mountains. We use a lot of energy and water for making snow and for melting snow. We also have huge challenges with employee housing and local housing because we're surrounded by so much federal open land. So we wanted to add some of those criteria that would really compel our places to do better. So we created the Mountain Ideal, which is a GSTC recognized standard, so it's been reviewed by the GSTC, and that standard is what we were certified to by Green Destinations, which is an accredited certifying body. So we've worked hard to educate our community. This is just an example of a small piece that we've used to distribute to employees throughout the destination to help them understand what it is, what we're trying to do. And if you look back at Mountain Ideal, IDEAL is an acronym that stands for Innovation, Diversity, Education, Authenticity, and Leadership. And we feel like these are things that can speak to any mountain resort community or destination that we want to aspire to these things. So we can use this language to create some of our code of conduct and goals. From the destination perspective, I'm also an elected official on the Vail Town Council. When I started this work, I ended up going to a lot of local meetings, and I felt like, boy, our sustainability voice is not being represented. So I went and got elected to the Vail Town Council. And from that perspective, one of the things that we are really challenged with is our water quality. And so we've created an action plan, 5-year action plan to improve the quality of our creek. We've also really started to tackle housing for locals. We've had to invest in land and infrastructure, and this is just an example of a new housing project that we put money into. So that's one of the things we monitor is the percentage of local people that are living within our destination, because it's too taxing for people to have to travel back and forth from where they live to where they work. Another one of our challenges is being surrounded by huge federal lands and getting our federal budgets for Forest Service cut constantly, more money being diverted to the large forest fires many of you have heard of. So we've had to discuss as a stewardship council how we can maintain the services that protect the destination recreational amenities, the trails, the trailheads, the wildlife, because the federal funding is being reduced. They don't have as many employees. So locally, we're having to pitch in and pay for those services that were once provided to us. And then this is an example of the Actively Green Business Certification. We really recognize those businesses that participate, have an annual awards party, and many ways we give back to them. So I'm going to end there and leave more time for questions.
Thank you, Kim. And I might add one important point here. The GSTC criteria are basically the starting point, right, Mandy? So this was a very suitable thing that they did in Vail, which was now we'll add what's going to be special and important to our area. Now, at the risk of scrambling my panel entirely, Glenn, would you be willing to go next? And the reason is I'd like to end on Botswana and bring it home to where we're at.
Switch over here. So for those that haven't heard me speak yet, I'm from British Columbia, which is in Canada, which is on the west coast of British Columbia, of Canada. And I'm just going to really summarize a couple of thoughts that I have when it comes to strategies. We embarked on our region is about 71,000 square kilometers in size. There's 90 communities, 33 indigenous communities, and over 4,000 tourism operators. And we had a very similar challenge as the Azores just mentioned about seasonality, where we had, in 45 days, people generated 80% of their income. So it was very concentrated and not sustainable. And so we realized we needed to tackle this, we needed to tackle a strategy that really addressed this challenge head on. And so we embarked on an 18-month process that engaged all 80 and 90 communities, all 33 indigenous communities, and over 1,800 operators in order to develop a common vision for a region, quite frankly, the size of Ireland. And it was a challenge because there wasn't a lot of trust between communities in some instances. There wasn't trust in the process. But quite frankly, when you take the time necessary to talk to people, build trust and relationships, you're able to get common agreement. And we were able to achieve that with a common approach and a common vision. And one of the big fundamental parts of that was obviously sustainability at the core of the strategy. We as an organization had to change the way we did our business. We started our organization where 100% of our expenditures was on marketing. And that's what we spent our money on, and that's what we tried to do, just keep trying to promote to try and change the result, and it didn't change the result. So now we spend about 60% of our budget on destination development, product development, experience development, and programs around sustainability, and only 40% on marketing. And that was a big change in how we needed to do our business internally. We established a strategy, as I mentioned, and did a series of regional projects and partnerships to advance sustainability and product development within the region. Ultimately, we became the first destination in the Americas to achieve Biosphere Certified Destination status through the Responsible Tourism Institute, which then tied our objectives to the 17 goal areas of sustainability. The other big message that I wanted to leave is the importance of your indigenous communities as perhaps one of the cornerstones of developing your tourism product, because consumers around the world are interested in engaging with the indigenous experiences, authentic indigenous experiences. So we went out to our 33 indigenous communities and engaged with those communities in a respectful way. And again, as I've said before, with our mouths closed and ears open to what their interests are and what stories they're prepared to share, because the visitor is extremely interested in hearing what their stories are and experiencing the land and the culture that goes with that. And so we spend a lot of time on revealing those stories, creating authentic content, educating consumers, celebrating indigenous artisans, and ultimately successfully bringing those 33 communities together to make a formal bid to attract and secure an international indigenous conference, which was the first time all the 33 indigenous communities came together for a common project that happened to be through tourism. Additionally, it's a partnership industry. You can't do tourism in isolation in terms of developing a product and experiences, and we needed to develop partnerships with organizations locally, regionally, provincially, nationally, and actually internationally as well to develop our product and experiences. So I really encourage partnership development in order to advance tourism in your respective area. And then one of the other things when we looked at tourism, we needed to rethink what we measured success around. It wasn't about just the numbers of volume of visitors, because we hear it all the time. We heard presentations throughout the course of the last 2 days which talked about number of visitors and how much income it generated and all those kind of things. But there are so many other metrics that need to be considered in order to be successful. How many women are in senior positions in tourism operations across your respective region? How much of your output is drawn from sustainable practices like in your food and beverage industry? We test those very things on an annual basis as a tourism body because we consider those as additional benchmarks of the success of an area. We need to confront zero-sum thinking. So every time we try to gain a revenue or gain resources or gain new product, it can't be because of at the expense of something else. We changed our idea from inclusivity to exclusivity. So we wanted to look at attracting not only visitors, we wanted to attract visitors that wanted to come, that may have had disabilities. So we had to make sure all our products were accessible. We understand that tourism is a privilege, not a right. We need to respect our indigenous or residential communities, which everybody has talked about. And ultimately, we focused a great deal of our product development effort on experiential. So the result of that is that we went from 45 days of revenue 6 years ago to 110 days of revenue in 6 short years. And prior to that, it took 50 to 100 years of tourism that was stuck on this 45-day window. And this is the fundamental change that happened in that regard. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Glenn. And based on your achievements there, is there a particular action you foresee next for your region, or alternatively, based on your experience, is there an action you recommend for places that are just starting out on this kind of process?
You got the mic. Sorry. I know it's confusing.
Sorry.
I don't know. Well, one of the things that and this is great that we're at this conference, I think certification is important because what it did was it brought together a focus of looking at all the sustainability factors and looking at a broader approach to tourism. We developed, much like what Jonathan just mentioned, an interdepartmental committee of organizations to work on the planning of the future of the destination. And those organizations are not just tourism organizations. They could be women's equality, poverty, water quality organizations, environmental organizations. So it looks at a broad spectrum of the future of the destination. And I expect that what comes out of those discussions, of those planning efforts, we will get new results and new ideas as a result of that.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for pinch hitting for Ronald, who was not feeling well. He was going to talk about the roadmap for Norway, and this is a process I'm somewhat familiar with, and one that Iceland is now also copying on a national level, basically beginning your tourism management plan, and I'm sure that'll be available for anybody who wants it. Mutana, you want to wrap it up for us?
Good afternoon. My presentation is basically going to be sharing a couple of approaches that I believe creates a very important platform in terms of destination stewardship, in particular reference to our region, which is Chobe. Basically, I will be looking at initiatives that we are currently implementing. And one of the first ones that I will refer to is the Sustainable Shopping Strategy. This is a project that we developed looking at the challenges that we had with regards to local community access to our Chobe riverfront. Or, in the case of Sweden, who are our partners in this project, they also have Lake Vänern, where they also have almost a similar challenge of lack of community access to the shoreline of that lake. So what we did, we came up with a twinning project, and we were working together to come up with ideas to develop a strategy for implementation in ensuring sustainable utilization and access to these important resources. And secondly, the other project that we looked at, or that we're working on, is the development of a transboundary tourism strategy, which we're doing within the CASA TFCA framework. This is basically to say, we need to develop tourism products which cuts across the borders. And we've also realized that most of the areas where we have a lot of biodiversity, which are really very rich in terms of attraction, some of them are located along the borders. And it's always very difficult, to plan and manage such areas without implementing transboundary approaches. We also have within the district what we call an integrated land use plan, which we developed considering what has been discussed earlier on in terms of the gateway communities. So it's very important when you plan for an area or an attraction or a site. For example, in our case, the Chole National Park, which is our prime attraction, the plan must take into consideration the areas adjacent to the park. We have also started developing what we call a shared code of conduct in partnership with our Namibian counterparts, because we're sharing a river with Namibia, and it's different land uses on either sides of the river. So it was really very critical for us to get together and come up with what we call a shared code of conduct, so that both parties can be able to achieve sustainable use of the river. And I think with regards, I think they put up a wrong presentation. Sorry, who is the gentleman who is? I think they put up wrong slides for me. Sorry about that.
Technically cursed section. While we're getting this fixed, does anybody have a suggestion for anything? Yeah?
Suggestion for what?
No, I meant for destination strategy.
Sorry about that. They put in the different version of my presentation, so they didn't know. Okay, like I was saying, the approach that we did in working on the first project that I spoke about, the sustainable shoreline. Jonathan, that means I have another 4 minutes. So the approach was to, learn from our, counterparts in Sweden, how they were also looking at improving access of the local community to a lake. And in our case, is the Chole River. And this we did through building networks, collecting and spreading knowledge, and developing a lot of ideas on how we can best utilize our riverfront. And then ultimately formulate strategies that would be a foundation for implementation. And basically, this is the setup of how we had structured the project. And we basically, timing the project in such a way that we'll be able to hold meetings in Sweden and in Botswana, following up the steps or stages of the project. We have reference groups in Sweden which we're also attending, and also here, so that we can put the information together and share ideas. So these are the overview of some of the proposals that we came up with. For example, we have realized that along our riverfront, there's quite a lot of developments in terms of tourism facilities, but we needed to improve access by the local communities in terms of utilizing the riverfront. And that is where you see that dotted line going along the riverfront, which represents the riverside walkway, which we intend to develop, either as boardwalk, or in other areas we just use natural paths. The other project that I was talking about earlier is the development of transbound tourism products. Here we are saying we need to, use opportunities that exist in terms of the connectivity that is already there in terms of the system. So, due to the strategic location of Chobe and Chobe National Park, right there almost in the middle of the TFCA, there is quite a lot of opportunities in terms of developing bedding routes, developing boat safari routes, which we can, utilize and improve the tourism revenues within the area. And basically, in a nutshell, we could, in developing such initiatives, use the approaches that we guided through the GSTC in terms of coming up with a destination management committee to oversee this kind of initiatives, development of a destination management strategy, and here, one would also throw a thought of either mainstreaming it to existing strategies that we already have, or aligning, a strategy that we are developing with the sustainable development principles. And yesterday, we also, heard about CBNRM model, which we are using in our country in terms of, conservation, wise use of resources, and community development, which is something that we can also re-engineer and see how we can best have, high impact projects within the gateways communities that we have. Enabling policies here in terms of local economic development, and also, tourism policies should really consider these communities that are adjacent to these attractions that we always talking about. And I think finally, it will be good to apply the triple bottom line principle for sustainable development, which would really help us, cover a wide scope to achieve the socio-economic, the environmental aspects in terms of development. So I think with that, I would end my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Of the various things that you listed there at the end, and Thana, is there any particular one that you would say is the highest priority for the next action? Or what would you choose as the...
I think where we are, it would be best to come up with the destination management committee, because that is where we could, have a structure to start engaging both the public, the private, the civil society, in ensuring that we sustainably develop these projects.
You'll be astonished to find I think that's a great idea. Okay, do we have some questions for the panelists? Okay, over there.
Yes, Richard Denman from the UK, Associate Technical Director of GSTC, and from the consultancy, a tourism company. I'm very struck by 2 key themes coming out of the presentation today, but I think it also echoes quite a lot of what we've been hearing so far. One was the importance of the local supply chain, which really came out from the discussion this morning, but it's interesting how in the Azores particularly you've looked at local produce and so on. And then secondly, which has been echoed absolutely throughout, is the importance of having some kind of local destination management organisation that embraces sustainability or stewardship council or whatever. And I'd just like to put the two together, because I think there are issues to do with how you actually are going to involve the local suppliers, the agriculturalists, the craft makers and so on. And I think one of the ways in which this might be helped to develop is actually to include local agricultural associations, craft makers, guilds and this sort of thing centrally within the Destination Management Organisation and Stewardship Council. Now, I know that's quite difficult to do in some places where these organisations may not exist. So that's my observation, and I just want to know if any of you have had any experience of that might reflect that thought.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. in our region, one of the organizations we saw opportunity to develop a strong partnership with Slow Food International, and ultimately a local convivium was created for the Thompson Okanagan region as a whole, and those producers are members of that group, and we saw that the Slow Food International goals and ideals fit perfectly with what the objectives are, what we were looking at from the tourism perspective as well. So they're fully engaged, and in fact we were one of the founding organizations of that convivium, so that was a big part of that connection.
And we also have, we started 3 months ago a roadshow through the 9 islands in the Azores of what we call the Azores Sustainability Charter. And we are calling all the private sector, including agriculture, to sign this charter. What we do is to explain what is the 17 SDGs and how can they adopt these SDGs, these goals to their organizations and productions and everything.
I'll add one observation to that, and that is that I think food and agriculture are a terrific tool for constructive tourism development, and we've now got the agritourism movement going, the farm-to-table movement going, the wind is with us on this. And in addition to supply chain, food also tells a story, and it's a good way to interpret a lot of the history and background of the destination and the culture. Use the back of menus more is one thing I recommend. Next question. Andy.
Thank you. I like all this, what I heard about food and sourcing and slow food. That's fabulous. The Slow Food International is incredible. And the Slow Travel group that followed up. But my question to the full panel is this. We've heard comments here and elsewhere that tourism can be a driver to inspire some elements of greater society, of community life, and the quality of life of residents. And I've thought a lot, working on quite often in developing countries, that waste management issues, litter, plastics, these are some of the most critical issues in the developing world, and then the plastics is now entered, as we know, the food chain of the entire planet, because plastics are everywhere in the ocean. So any thoughts on what can we do more to kind of inspire from tourism? Because I think that, you know, I remember as a child just kind of getting on a crew, you know, when I was 10 years of age and picking up litter along a highway. It changed the behavior of all my classmates. You know, those kinds of children's programs work around the world. And I think that if we can harness the power of the tourism community at a destination to do some cleanup of beaches, whatever, teaches the children, but maybe inspires the whole community is just one idea. But what I really want to do is hear from you. How can tourism kind of inspire on some of these issues of cleanliness, waste, plastics, and so forth, to degrade our touristic destination, but then along the way, we're educating and inspiring the community to kind of do better in general, whether it's the public utility to get better, or the behavior of the citizens themselves.
I feel like we do have that kind of platform. We have, in our small village, we host about 2.9 million people per year, and so education is a key component of our strategy in providing opportunities for guests to learn and participate, and they're always asking for ideas that they can bring back home. So I think it's really critical to integrate education throughout and to give visitors an opportunity to give back to the community. So in our particular context, we have a 1% for the Forest Fund, and we have a ski area conservation fund where for every visitor that comes and buys a ski ticket, $1 gets put into a fund, and that money gets given back to local NGOs to do conservation projects on the surrounding lands. So there's a variety of ways that our guests can plug in, get educated, and give back.
I think it's there's quite a lot that I believe should be done in terms of engaging the industry. In our case, we have what we call, it's a non-governmental organization, which is called Enviro 911. This is a group of operators in the industry and private sector, who have come up with a group which is just out there to look at areas where you would have litter or any incident that you feel will be detrimental to the environment. And immediately, you sound that alarm, and the relevant, member who is responsible for that particular area, picks it up and shares the information with the local authorities to, either go and clean up. But I think beyond this, it's really very important to continue with education and coming up with sustainable ways of funding and having organized ways of managing the waste within our areas. And I also believe that CSR, if it's done just for the sake of making sure that you have achieved your CSR policy and not going beyond that to making sure that the project that you're coming up is sustainable and it can benefit the local community. Sometimes results in these once-off campaigns which then dies out and the litter continues again. So I think it's important to come up with a more structured, which also should also involve the authorities that are dealing with waste management within the destination.
I think there are some opportunities here because also a lot of the trash that we're coping with for any oceanfront destination, this is becoming a mutual issue for both the people who live there and the tourists. And there may be even an opportunity for a new form of voluntourism, which is also an opportunity to get to meet the locals. And that would be cleanup days, joint cleanup days, followed maybe by a party or some pizza or something, because often tourists are looking for ways to interact with locals, and this might be an opportunity. And one other approach, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, is to turn the trash into crafts. And I believe in Kenya, wasn't it, they were doing that, making basically flip-flops out of plastic that they melt down, create new shoes. And then St. John and the U.S. Virgin Islands, for a while, they couldn't recycle the glass. They had no practical way to recycle it the way we would normally do in a destination of full recycling facilities. So they taught some islanders to learn glass blowing. And they would create sometimes extremely beautiful bits of glassware. And I remember Stanley Selwyn holding up one of them that said that you could see this for sale in a pricey shop in London or New York. And this is made of a combination of Budweiser and Heineken. And that worked a creative way to deal with what you're stuck with anyway. Anybody else out there? Yes? One back there and then one up front.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Darren Mudley from Mauritius Island. For those who know Mauritius, we have for long been considered only for our beaches and our lagoons and our big resorts. Quite recently now we are embarking into this sustainability change of doing tourism in Mauritius. What we face right now is that when we are moving from our traditional way of welcoming our guests to more sustainable, it means that for the operators we need quite a shift, also an injection of money, of investment, to come out from our traditional way of doing business to the new models. From the experts, have you also faced that kind of challenges where operators are reluctant to invest in new technologies and to make their product more sustainable?
I think it's important to tell them what the benefits would be in terms of their upfront investment. Oftentimes they'll, start realizing actual real savings. Just to line out all those benefits really clearly and articulate that in shared case studies, that's worked really well for the businesses, not necessarily as many tour operators, but large hotels and other types of businesses. I think that's very helpful to clearly explain the benefits right away.
That's what we got. This question up here.
My name is Thompson. I'm with Flamingo Investments. They run a couple of lodges in the Delta, and I believe some of you are coming to my camps tomorrow, Tuesday, sorry. Mine is more a comment than a question, or a challenge in that as much as we talk about educating, I think the people that are getting left behind are the travel agents on what is available, and it's the small things in terms of, while we're here, sustainability. We know what we're doing, you know what you're doing. The traveler doesn't know the water quality of where they're going, but they don't find out, so they become a little bit fearful of drinking the water or the tap water, which doesn't help in trying to eliminate plastics, even though they might do that at home. They're going to a third world country, and then they get here and reverse efforts that we're all here trying to achieve and maintain. So it's both educating the traveler and the tour operator, and that I think they get caught up in selling the product as to what they will be consuming there.
I would agree with that. We're in a similar situation. People just come and they go to the grocery store and buy bottled water when they don't need it at all. So it's really important to have the community on board, to have the right kind of infrastructure so that people learn, bring your own water receptacle or whatever message it might be, but that needs to be communicated up front and across the destination. So working together as a Destination Stewardship Council, and getting that message out, putting it out to the booking agents. This is the kind of place you're going to. You need to bring your own water bottle or whatever it might be. I think that's where the power, the collective power of sustainable tourism and travel, if people want to be associated with that, then they have to travel in the right way. They have to kind of walk the talk. So I think it's just getting started, but we all need to work together on those kinds of messages.
Yeah, particularly since this is so closely affiliated with the battle on plastic, I think the issue you raise is really important, and I will frankly confess I have no idea whether the tap water in this hotel is drinkable or not, because nobody told me. And there's a plastic bottle full of water. And just to show that this is not just a developing country problem, China can put astronauts in orbit around the Earth, and they're landing on the backside of the moon shortly, but you still can't drink tap water in China. But anything that is generating more use of plastic is a problem, and for reasons unknown to me, somehow it became fashionable in the United States to go buy bottled water when the tap water is generally good almost everywhere except Flint, Michigan. Anybody else on that? Any other comments? We're running to the end of our show. Yes, one right there.
I would like to table the human-wildlife conflict subject. It's one usually ignored component that has a bearing on how tourism moves forward. There was a Elephant Without Borders result released a couple of months ago, and already the tourism industry was looking at cancellations. Poaching is one issue that can affect the tourism industry moving forward, and as a result of human-wildlife conflict, where people lose crops to elephants and livestock to, of course, lions and other predators. And when not addressed appropriately, issues of, negative attitude and perception towards a wildlife-based tourism industry, which is what the Botswana tourism is largely based on, increases poaching. And to a larger degree has given rise to political debates on whether we should resume hunting or not. And I know those two elements are really not very good for non-conservative tourism. Do we have a strategy? If not, my encouragement is let's table it. Let's look at ways in which we can address human-wildlife conflict towards resolving it, not just top-down, but also bottom-up. Thank you.
Yeah, what adds to this complexity is tourist attitudes themselves, which may not be necessarily the most informed for the particular destination. Anybody want to speak to this? Wise man.
He was just taking
Yes.
I think that's best left to our government and stakeholders, in that it is a very unique situation. I doubt yourselves could give much input into that, and that I would hope to believe that there's people scratching their heads and crunching numbers on the best way forward on that. I think the worst thing that could happen is if they are clouded by misinformation, and I think there are enough resources within the country to come to a conclusion on that.
Anybody else? I think we're coming to the end of our session here. We can go a little longer, right? Okay. All right, I'm going to repeat my challenge from before. I would like some proposals for actions going forward. And if nobody volunteers, I'm going to start pointing fingers at people. Do I see anyone who's thought of something based on the conversations we've had or the conversations we have not had that we should be thinking about? Often conferences like this are great for chit-chatting and coming up with ideas, but then what do we do? I'll sit here and stare at you for a minute.
I've got the mic back.
And we have quite a bit of time, don't we?
I wasn't sure what I was coming to. The thing that is most pleasing is on local communities, because I think that they've always, well, mostly have been left behind from what I've seen, my experiences and observations. And so the thing that's pleased me the most about this conference is that it is not a unique situation to ourselves in Botswana, and it is a wealth of knowledge around the globe that has been recognized, and that steps have been taken to deal with such situations.
This has come up repeatedly this week in how to engage local communities and to make sure they are engaged. And it's certainly a challenge for many of the locations we have in the United States. And to take action, I wonder if those who have had successful experience with this, Glenn and you, it would be good to contribute your knowledge. Here's how this community got involved. And send that to us. Send it to Randy, send it to me, so that we can begin circulating this knowledge. Because out there are a lot of people that are trying to figure out how to do the right thing, and they want examples. They want to know what worked somewhere else. I think it's a real important issue, and the fact that it keeps coming up here is evidence of that.
What I was thinking is, Currently, we had kind of disjointed processes. For example, we have the community-based natural resource management. And I remember after the conclusion of the Okavongo Delta Management Plan, we had what we called a Okavongo Wetland Committee, which used to bring together communities. I think what really made it fall apart was there was lack of continued funding and commitment, and then it kind of fell apart. But from what Ntana has just presented, because they have started working together, the government, local authorities, the private sector, and the communities, that could be a learning point, especially with the experiences from all these other presenters, that we can see if it works well for Chobe, then we can revive the others like the Namibian and then maybe in other parts of the country and see how well. Because for example, let's say CPNRM used to say communities will be given concessions and then they enter into partnership with the private sector. Those were kind of isolated benefits for individual communities. However, if we come up with this destination stewardship, it will revive and bring everybody together. The private sector and, like you were saying, even the NGOs and academia, so that they can share experiences and guide the whole process and make it work as a united force, as opposed to doing it piecemeal.
I can contribute a few lessons we learned, and it's not as if we did a huge number of these projects, maybe 6 to 10 depending, but we learned each time. And one of them was you have to have strong local leaders. Another was that you need to have something with a deadline. And if that didn't occur, the committee or the council would meet a couple of times, and then there just wouldn't be enough incentive to keep it going. So it was important, first of all, for some key people to get together and say, we want to do this, and then bring other people into the conversation. What do we want to do? This is an excellent time to get the local community involved, and then pick something that we agree we need to do by such and such a time. And the second problem, and this is not entirely solved yet, I think Glenn's come up with one way to go about it. A lot of the councils work fine, particularly if they're working on a National Geographic map guide. That was a big name, they had a deadline and so on. The project would get done, and then they go, well, what now? And there was no thinking about what will be the next step. And beyond that, there wasn't enough thinking about how to make themselves sustainable. We're talking about institution building here, because most places don't have anything like this. That's why we're trying so hard to find the ones that are getting there. And if you're building an institution, you have to have some revenue and be able to have at least one staff person to be able to get things done. And I think one way to go about that brings us back to certification, local certification, getting businesses involved, and part of that can become a revenue stream for the local council. I'm going to get you more work, Randy.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, we accomplished the certification, but it helped us identify our weaknesses. So those are things to keep us going and working forward on, to just continuous improvement, to monitor our results annually. And then also, we're fortunate that we do have a sustainable funding mechanism in the form of a real estate transfer tax. I know that won't work everywhere, but that tax was put in place to fund open space and sustainability programs. So if you can think of a long-term funding mechanism like that, that can be very, very helpful to maintain the Destination Stewardship Council, to get more businesses involved, and to have some incentives for people to show up.
Who else? I know it's the middle of the afternoon. There's someone back there.
Thanks very much. From discussions in the panel and during today with other participants, one thing that really has come out is waste management issue in the Delta and probably throughout Botswana. And I think it's an area that we really need to focus on and look at possible recycling mechanisms within Botswana that we can set up, because we rely predominantly on taking our waste for recycling to South Africa. And I think Botswana really needs to focus on that.
What would be a first step, do you think?
Well, I've been talking to a few of the operators here, and I think it's a big challenge for everybody, because they're trying to be sustainable, but they don't know what to do with their waste. So I think coming together as a community, I'm a consultant, but with BTO, maybe with HATAB, and with the operators to discuss mechanisms of how we can get funding for writing a proposal, for getting funding for setting something up. I see that as the first steps.
Does anybody have an additional idea for that?
Maybe just to check in the room if there's somebody from Maun here. There's one initiative which I've heard about in Maun, the one that you just mentioned, Trash for Cash, which I think it's really a good start. Those are some of the pilot initiatives that people can try. Just yesterday, I made an observation in one of the shops just behind this hotel. I'm calling it a shop because I don't want anyone to think that I went to a bar. The observation is very honest and serious. When they closed, there was literally no can on the ground, no water. There was a van which was collecting all the waste around that area, because I'm told they are exchanging that for cash. So we take that in the following morning. Maybe you.
But where does it go to? That's the question.
Yeah,
I
that
live
is
in
the
Maun,
challenge.
and I'm talking to Maun residents, and I'm talking to people that run companies in Maun and the Delta. So, but where does that waste go to? That's the issue. Because there are waste collections, there are people that come separate your waste, which is fine. But then there's nowhere that actually recycles. Here.
Yeah, that's the main problem is the recycling factories within Botswana. But once it's collected, it can be taken out to where it can be recycled, and mostly it's in South Africa. But at least you wouldn't have waste on your environment. But the main, I think in terms of policy from government side, it's very important to, come up with strategies to encourage recycling initiatives at a bigger scale within the country.
I just want to mention it has to begin before recycling. It's really reducing the materials, because I'm also from a rural area, and the transport of the recycling materials, if you have to take it all the way to another place that's far away, it's way too expensive. Who's going to pay for the gasoline, the diesel to get it there? So the best thing you can do is just to reduce the glass altogether, and
I think, yeah, you're right. I think a lot of lodges are trying to do that. But when people go on holiday, they want to drink wine. So, and preferably from a bottle rather than from a box, which, so there are still challenges. There's still waste created.
I think this is an interesting challenge, and I know that out there are various experts in various places that have experimented with different ways of handling this. There are places in Mexico that use bottles as part of construction material, and it's kind of fun. You need a mild climate. This one has a pretty mild climate, and you actually embed the bottles in the wall, and they are light transmitters, and you can make patterns out of it. I think there are some engineering solutions to this, and there are some artistic solutions. It's certainly not going to clean it all up, but some creativity would help, and I think some waste disposal expertise would help, which probably none of us have in this room, but it's out there, and well worth researching. this time? Okay. Thank you very much. Please keep thinking about actions. Please send your ideas to all of us at GSTC, and let's keep moving forward. Thank you all.